So as a musician and a arranger, I already have a lot of friends who are aware of the magic of computer macros, but I decided to make a quick video demonstrating what they can do for a workflow for those who may not be familiar with the concept. And I'm going to be demonstrating using two pieces of software that I own. One is called Metagrid, and it's an app that you can get for your iPad if you have one. And the second of which is called Keyboard Maestro, which is a popular macro control software for Mac specifically. So let me show you some examples of how I use this in composition and arranging. So Metagrid is a program for the iPad, and I believe it's available for other platforms as well, where you can basically just set up these screens of custom defined buttons and give them each different functions, color code them, all that good stuff. So if we look here into one button, for instance, we can see I've defined a keyboard shortcut or a hotkey for it to do. Some of you may be familiar with the Stream Deck. This is effectively just a cheaper alternative to the Stream Deck. The Stream Deck, really the only difference here is that this is a physical interface where you can find the icons, you can hit an actual tactile button if that's your cup of tea, but this is basically does the exact same thing. Keyboard Maestro is a piece of software for the Mac that lets you program your own macros, which is just a long series of actions you can take in a computer. So effectively what you can do with Metagrid, however, these can be more advanced. So you can tell it to click at a certain pixel point on the screen. You can tell it to pause. You can even pause until certain conditions are met, if-else statements. You can have different variables that you define. So effectively anything you can think of on a computer that you do a bunch, you can program it in here, and it'll save you a lot of time with whatever long mundane tasks you do frequently, but have programmed to happen in one press of a button. The reason I like using these two apps in conjunction is because Metagrid recently released an update that directly natively supports Keyboard Maestro. You used to have to define like a MIDI signal for this to send, and then this would have to detect the same MIDI signal. But now, for instance, I have a macro to toggle playback on and off in Sibelius. So now I just have this button that is defined as linked directly to the toggle playback macro on my computer. So I'll press it on here, and it'll take all the steps that I've previously defined in Keyboard Maestro. I'm going to demonstrate a few of them now so that you can see how I integrate these two things in my workflow. So first of all, whenever I open up Sibelius, I always like to check certain settings on certain plugins that pop up every single time when you're using the software. So I just made a single macro that opens up a predetermined file, resets and checks all of the options that I want in every plugin that I'm going to use throughout my session, and then closes that out automatically. And I didn't touch anything except for this one button, and it did all that. So now I won't have to worry about that. I've opened up my cool piece, and I want to start importing some instruments. However, I'm going to use some virtual drumline instruments that are not currently in my file, so I set up another macro to export a house style here, import the VDL instrument definitions, and then revert it. So it'll look the exact same as here, but we'll just have the VDL instruments available. So you see it goes through the steps of exporting a dummy house file, importing the VDL instrument definitions, and making sure everything looks the same. So now, everything is exactly as it was a few moments ago, except in the blink of an eye, we now also have all of our VDL instruments available. So now let's go ahead and add some instruments to the score, and here's one I'm quite proud of. I made this screen where each instrument that I might commonly use in Sibelius has its own button, and so for instance, say I want to add a flute. I hit the button, and it goes to the correct instrument, searches it in the correct menu. If I want to add now a percussion instrument for my VDL sound set, I'll add, let's say, just some timpani. And here's a cool thing. First of all, you see it automatically navigates me to the VDL menu, but at the same time, it'll also ask me what hardness of timpani I want. This is something I did with Keyboard Maestro, where I just have to type in hard, medium, soft, or HMS. So let's say I want medium hardness, hit enter, it automatically finds the right instrument and adds it for me. I'll do that again. Let's add a marimba, a VDL marimba. Let's make this soft. I don't know why I need medium timpani and soft marimba, but let's say I do. And it just adds it all in like that. Something else I did with some percussion instruments, so let's say I have, our typical battery percussion, I'll add a snare line instrument, and now it'll ask me whether I want auto write L or manual sticking VDL instrument. So let's say manual for now, I'll hit that, and it'll finish and select the correct one. And I'll hit OK. Obviously I could do this forever. This is an interesting instrumentation. Somebody commissioned me to write that, but I could do this all day just pressing a button and defining hardnesses rather than having to manually, search through all of the definitions and go to the right menu, find the right category and all that. It can all just happen right in this interface. One of my favorite things to do is to play with some functionalities that aren't directly built into Sibelius. So in Dorico, which is my other software of choice, there's a functionality where you can move stuff to a staff above and below. You can duplicate it to a staff above and below. Sibelius does not support this natively. However, I programmed this macro where I can duplicate to staff above and below, or let's say move to staff below, and it'll automatically get rid of it in the top staff. Just a few things that I like to add in. I also customize keyboard shortcuts for different pedal lines. So here in my piano part, I can just hit the buttons for each corresponding type of pedal. I can go on, do my own thing however I want to without having to manually go into the lines menu and find it every time. This is all possible through Sibelius keyboard shortcut preferences that you can set for yourself. And then of course there's just a bunch of simple stuff you can do. You know, I can select a note, add in a dynamic marking, and you'll see what I like about this as opposed to using the Stream Deck is that this is just super snappy. You see it's effectively happening as soon as I hit the button, and it's happening really, really quickly. I also have some plugins I like using. For instance, I like using the Multiply Dynamics plugin in Sibelius, so I set a Metagrid shortcut for that, and it'll automatically paste those dynamics across everything. I'm sure most arrangers probably know that plugin anyway, at least you should. So let's say, for instance, I'm engraving this piece. I have a different menu for a bunch of layout options, like hiding things, magnetic layout, working on previous parts. So here I'm going to filter all of my pedal lines, and then I'm going to have a dedicated button I have just to freeze the magnetic layout. So now I can adjust it and engrave it as I want to. And again, this is the sort of stuff that's already fairly easy with keyboard shortcuts in Sibelius, but having this tactile interface in front of me just makes that process a whole lot easier, especially since you can manually define these shortcuts and icons however you want. Here's another practical example of a macro that comes up a lot in percussion arranging in particular, where, say, I set up a notation that I don't want to play back. And normally, you would have to go into the Sibelius inspector, select playback off for everything, close the inspector and all that, which doesn't seem like much, but to truly save time, that's another thing I've automated. So I have my toggle playback button, I'll hit it, and you see it'll automatically open the menu, direct the mouse to the correct part of the screen, and close the screen. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can use these sort of commands and shortcuts in your arranging or composing workflow. This is heavily inspired by a video that I'm sure a lot of us have seen. It's a Tim Davies video called Extreme Aussie Orchestration that I'll link in the comments. It's a classic. He is somebody who works in film orchestration, and he made a video using a different piece of software and a different just like integration, but it accomplishes much the same thing. I'm just making this video to encourage people to explore their workflow and check out the possibilities available through this technology and through all the programs that are available. If anybody wants to see a specific tutorial video on how to set stuff like this up, let me know. I figure most of it can already be found via the Metagrid and Keyboard Maestro documentation, YouTube channels, etc. But let me know if I can be of any assistance, and I hope you got some ideas from this.